It doesn't help if you guys are not added to the room. Good morning, and thank you. You're watching the DMZ America podcast for Thursday, April 23rd. Coming to you from the left, I am editorial cartoonist Ted Rall.
And coming from the discombobulated right, I'm Scott Stantis. And before we introduce our guest, Ted, we've been doing this podcast now for what, 5 years?
That's right.
Okay, you do understand this is the DMZ America podcast.
Yes.
Okay, the countdown into this was not for the DMZ.
I know, because I had a tech issue. Yeah.
And the outro last week was...
Which also not true.
Yes.
Yeah, you try keeping all this stuff straight. Yeah.
Oh, I can't, and I'm not doing anything.
Yeah.
I apologize. First of all, last week, Ted and I did not do the podcast. My mother-in-law passed away. And so we were dealing with that. And so going forward, then I caught the mother of all flus. So I still feel like garbage, but I feel less like garbage today. So yay, me. Our guest today is better than the flu. It's Marshall Ramsey.
That's contagious, maybe.
Unfortunately, because he's one of the top cartoonists in the country. He was previously of the Clarion Ledger in Jackson, Mississippi Today. He's still with Creators Syndicate, still cranking this stuff out and doing things for Ole Miss because he's a smarty pants and he works at a university now. You can tell by the blue blazer. Marshall, thanks for coming on the show.
Oh, thank you. It's good to see you guys. I'm glad you're feeling a little bit better, Scott.
Yeah, me too. Oh, and by the way, Marshall's also a 2-time Pulitzer finalist, which is precisely 2 times more than me. And what, Ted, you're a 2-time Pulitzer finalist too.
I'm only a oneer. Why
do I keep thinking you're 2? Maybe because I figure you deserve it.
Maybe you think I'm a 2-timer like Marshall.
Before we jump into talking about cartooning, the future of cartooning, here's a piece of news that's actually going to break here on DMZ America podcast. Marshall has been kind enough to accept my invitation to take over my comic strip, Prickly City. Prickly City is just past the 22-year mark. That seems plenty for me to foist my opinion on the American people through the comics pages. It was the weirdest thing. I will let Marshall talk, I promise. But I was talking about who should take over the strip. We're kind of winding it down. I talked to the president of of AM Universal, the syndicate that distributes my comic strip. And then I was talking to Mike Thompson, who said, "What about Marshall Ramsey?" And I've apologized in private. Now I apologize in public that why in the name of God that name never popped into my head to begin with. Marshall and I share very similar stories, although he's younger than I am. And hence didn't have to go through the witch hunts of the McCarthy era of the 50s, as a 5-year-old child. Are you now, or have you ever been a diaper wearer? Which was, anyway. But Marshall came to work at the Clarion Ledger in Jackson, Mississippi. What year was that, Marshall?
1996.
Yeah, I got here to Birmingham at the Birmingham News in 96 as well. So we got to be fast friends almost immediately because we were dealing with the same politics, the same legislature, and we played a mean game of dumb governor bingo. I still don't know who won that one. I think
yeah, I always thought of it as chess, but it was like, you could call me up one day and go check, and I could call you up the next day and go check. It's like our governors were in some kind of battle to the bottom. It was, I mean, we didn't have to work. We just literally walked in and it's like, looked at the front page. I always tell people I had a crack team of comedy writers at the state capitol and still do. I really have 30 years.
Well, let me ask you this, because I mean, when I first got to the Birmingham News, I succeeded a cartoonist who was not very good. It was not Charles Brooks, had actually retired 12 years before. People forget that. They think I followed him, and I didn't, which tells you the kind of cartoonist I succeeded, who was not really in the zeitgeist of Birmingham or Alabama. Point of fact, whenever he drew a cartoon, you could swear that Birmingham had no black people in it, which I thought was hilarious because at the time was 75% African American. The governor at the time was Fob James. I did Fob James' cartoon my first week here. The following Monday or Tuesday, I drew up another rough to do another Fob James cartoon because Fob James, Ted doesn't understand having governors named Fob, but that's where we live. And
I have governors named Mario and stuff like that.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. I've got Tate and Phil and Haley and and Kirk.
So Fob James he did, like Marshall mentioned, he was the governor of Alabama when I got here, and he did progressively stupider and stupider things. I did another cartoon, and the publisher of the paper said, "But you drew one last week." I'm going, that's not, he's still there, and he's still stupid.
It's like saying, I drew about the president last week.
No, it's the arrogance. This is going to get to a point, I swear. But it's the arrogance of the editorial page that these guys really felt, well, we've said it once. It's like they almost felt as if, Ted, like these were stone tablets coming down from the mound with the law. I have written it, hence it is said, hence it shall be done. Marshall, you faced the same bullshit I did, right?
Yeah, I walked in because the previous cartoonist before me, and I didn't really.
Your audio is going in and out. Is there a way to fix that?
I don't know. Let's see.
Oh, there you go. That's better.
I can't hear you.
Oh, you sound all right now.
Okay. Do I sound good?
Oh, I'm sorry. Again, bullshit. The same.
Okay.
Marshall.
No, I walked where it was the most surreal interview I'd ever been to in my life. They literally drove me around to Jackson at 10:30 at night and said, "There's the hospital. That's a great place to go if you're ever shot." And I was just like,
well, that's wow.
But the guy that was a cartoonist before me, Mark Bolton, and I'd never met Mark before. I guess y'all probably may have bumped into him along the way. But my editor hated each other. And because Mark would like leave at noon and go play golf and stuff like that, and it was like he sued the paper for wage and hour because he said that like when he was at home on the toilet that he would, deserved overtime. And so and then, which really, honestly, I'm with him on that because 90% of my great ideas come when I'm on the toilet. Right. So, but it was one of those things that and my editor is the nicest, sweetest human being in the world. And he honestly, I'm a 2-time finalist because I had David was fantastic, but he was convinced that every editorial cartoonist was crazy. And if you look at the history of the Clarion Ledger, there's been some, along the way that have been a little bit weird, and some really good ones too. I think about Arlo and Janice. Oh gosh, I'm just having
Jimmy Johnson.
Yeah, Jimmy was a cartoonist there for a while for the Daily News. But anyway, I come in, David's like, I remember it was like right before Christmas. And I said, "Hey, David, man, I just moved here from San Diego," which that was enough of a brain freeze in its own right, going from San Diego to Mississippi. But I said, I need to go Christmas shopping. And he like totally freaked out. He's like, "You can't leave early. You got to stay here till 5:30 every single day." And I was just like, what's going on? And
what for?
Editorial writers pulled me aside and said, "Dude, this is what's going on here." So after about 3 or 4 years, I think David started to trust me a little bit, and really a great deal. I think it really in this profession, and of course it doesn't really apply anymore, but if you follow somebody who your editor truly hates, it's not real hard to look good.
Yeah, I try to, never mind. I was just about to besmirch a fellow cartoonist because when I left the Birmingham News to take the job at the Chicago Tribune, I tried to push a cartoonist who had a reputation of being batshit crazy. In your face, nuts. And I thought, because they always said, my editors like to joke, "Yeah, cartoonists, they're expensive and a lot of trouble." I said, "You want a lot of trouble?"
Yeah, welcome to me.
Just you wait. And I know who you're talking about, and you are not exaggerating.
I think anyone who knows editorial cartooning can pretty much connect the dots on that one. It was very strange. So, Marshall, thanks for taking over Prickly City. And, I'm really looking forward to it. And by the way, for those of you who say, "Well, I don't want it to change," I don't think it can change. Should it change? Can it change? And I would argue that Marshall has already written the last 3 weeks of Prickly City. So nobody has, they're all, I did that as a trick. The people at the syndicate recognized it as the trick that it was. So I have to give them a few props there. But going forward, that's going to be a lot of fun. But that's.
It is trying to just sit and think, what would Scott Stantis think today?
Oh God.
Yeah.
If you have a hammer and some NyQuil, you'll probably get there eventually.
No, I honestly do not do that. Let you know. But it's been fun. Thank you. And like I said, it's a huge honor. I love Winslow and Carmen. I just think they're incredible characters. Totally. The fact that you, just like this podcast, two folks that truly, honestly, probably don't see eye to eye politically, but they, there's a degree of love and relationship there where they can get along. And damn it, this country needs that right now as much as anything. And so it's to be able to get and be able to run with it. Thank you so much for letting me have the opportunity.
Yeah, my pleasure. Hey, listen, take your earbuds out. Let's see if this works. First off, can you hear us?
Hey, can you hear me?
I can.
We can hear you. If you can hear us, then we're good.
Can you hear us?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah, very well.
Can you hear me?
You were just breaking out and dropping in and out. We want to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, I think basically I've got another mic, so that'll work fine. As long as you can hear me, that's okay.
Oh, you sound fantastic. Yeah.
Okay, good. Yeah, well, technology. Well, I'm sitting in the basement of my where my office is, so you never know.
Wow. They really recruited you hard there at Ole Miss.
Hey, man, I got a nice view. I can see everybody's feet when they walk past. But actually, I do have a window, and I do have a view of the Grove, which is like looking at a national park every day. So it's quite nice.
Can you reach out and grab people's feet like as they're passing by, kind of like like if you ever go to London and you do the torture tour of London, they show like where you know what I'm talking about. Like there's the
you did that? Oh yeah, my kids wanted to do that.
Yeah, it's like, and people would walk by, like Londoners would walk by, and there'd be people just under the street that they could reach out and barely touch people's heels.
Yeah, if I was into that, I could do it real easily, I guess.
Yeah, if that was your kink, man, that would be great.
Some people pay good money for that.
So comic strips, editorial cartooning. Like I said, you were with the Clarion Ledger. I can say it. You say what you want. They treated you like shit. You eventually left for Mississippi Today, which is a very well-funded, independent news site there in Mississippi. And they do a terrific job, and you did a terrific job for them. Then they brought in, someone who thought they were, an editor, and then editors. Am I right?
I had a good relationship there. I think it was a question of this job opened up here, and my wife had just lost her mom, and very similar situation in what you did. And like I said, Janine's in my prayers, man. That's been a tough row. Yeah. It was just we were empty nesters. Our youngest went off to college, and two of our kids went here. So we knew that they would actually come back here to see us if we were here, so there was a little bit of strategic planning on that, but it was a good opportunity. I'm getting my master's. We're starting a news lab, which is kind of a place for students to do experimental ways of storytelling and news coverage. And on top of that, Oxford, Mississippi is just an incredible place. It's just, I tell people it's really the epicenter for creativity here. There's so many great authors and friends that live up here. So it was a good opportunity to do that. I'm still doing some cartoons for Mississippi Today.
I stand corrected.
I do 1 a week for them, and that's fine. But I still need to keep that creative thing going, because it was like suddenly after about a week or two of not doing the daily work, I just started to cramp up a little bit, and then I started twitching, and then I started speaking in tongues, and it really got ugly really quickly.
God, the South is different.
What's that?
The South is different.
In many ways, Ted. Many ways.
More than you could possibly know.
Yeah,
I have some questions about you about the news of the day, which is a Southern-based story for you guys. What do you guys think about this DOJ filing against the Southern Poverty Law Center?
That's here in that's here in Alabama. It's down in Montgomery. And for those of you who may not know, they filed saying that they covertly funded the Ku Klux Klan. And what are the other parts of the charges?
Basically, it's money, it's fraud and money laundering, but it all basically boils down to the SPLC purchased, basically hired undercover. They paid their undercover informants who were members of far-right organizations like the Aryan Nation. And so they're being accused by the DOJ of effectively lying to their donors and saying, hey, we're doing this to take out the right, but in fact, they're kind of indirectly subsidizing the right. That's the logic of the DOJ complaint.
Mm. Yeah, you can tell by our faces. We're both.
It's because I noticed yesterday all of our elected officials were jumping all over that and crowing about the lawsuit and everything, and I was just like going, I don't know if it's a terribly good look that you're like all excited that that these hate groups are getting some support. I don't know. It was okay. Thank you, Ted, for that explanation. I'm going to go take a nap now.
It is pretty complicated.
Yeah.
And the thing is that the right is all over social media with pictures of like Aryan Nation or like the Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville saying like, look, these were always like Antifa. They're paid. There are no like real racists. They're all paid for by the left. That's literally.
Oh, is that their spin on this?
That's their spin.
Yeah.
Even though that's not alleged at all in the complaint.
No, of course not. Because why should facts get in the way of a good story or your emotions? The SPLC, the Southern Poverty Law Center, has done some yeoman's work. It's had some problems, and like any organization that has a pretty broad and significant donors list, there's also, let's be fair, there's been some fraud and some in the past.
There has.
Anytime there's a big pile of money, people are going to go and try and stick their thumbs in it.
That's right.
But overall, they're the only group in America that actually would monitor things like Aryan Nation, all the other racist groups, and quantify exactly the numbers involved there. Now, whether or not they're paying informants or not, I have no idea. I can't speak to that. I know Marshall can't either. Neither of us are members of SPLC in any way, shape, or form. But damn, they've done yeoman's work for the last 30 years when the government wouldn't. In this government, given that, our Secretary of War has, a fascist tattoo covering his left tit.
There is that.
This sort of would explain why they go after the SPLC. The SPLC is used to this kind of attack. You've got to believe that this preposterous lawsuit will be thrown out in short order. But so the right is going to say, Antifa, Antifa, Antifa. Whenever I ask this, I've used Ted's arguments, but I also I've shortened it to this. Whenever I hear someone say Antifa, I say, really, Antifa? Can you give me the URL to their webpage? Because they don't fucking exist.
Or their X feed or
any of it.
Yeah.
Show it to me. They don't exist. So because you want something to exist doesn't mean that it does. It reminds me back in the early 2000s when people said George W. Bush was smart behind closed doors. I go, no, you know what? When you're smart, if you're smart all the time. You don't wait for
you don't believe like that, like Karine Jean-Pierre was talking about Biden, like behind the scenes, he's like a tornado. I can barely keep up.
Well, power naps
like,
on
really?
the hour.
That's surprising.
I would like
Hillary
tornadoes
Clinton's
to be
really
like
charming
Joe Biden.
behind closed
That would be
doors.
Great.
One-on-one, Hillary Clinton's awesome over drinks, apparently.
Yeah, which I've heard. Again, you know when you're charming, if you're charming, all the fucking time.
And by the way, too bad for her, there's 330 million people in the country because she can't really meet all of them.
Yeah. Well, it's sort of like when I have a cartoon idea, which doesn't quite make it. It's just like, well, I'm going to have to go door to door tomorrow morning at every subscriber to the newspaper and go,
I have that problem.
Okay, what I meant was.
Yeah.
I did that this morning, actually. I had a cartoon idea.
You don't know
work,
me,
right,
but...
Scott?
No, he's starting to write, and there's one that I didn't quite understand. And so he tried to come back it got gummed up. So he came up with a real, actually, and what happened, for those of you who don't know Cartoonists, if you tell us that, our first reactions were pissed off that you're so friggin' stupid.
Yeah, we're
you
like,
don't get it.
Flipping you off.
It's your fault, not mine. And then you go back, and then the self-doubt starts crashing in.
And rightly so.
Yeah. Well, hey.
Well, it is our job to communicate.
But there are times when you do a cartoon that is crystal. Come on, Ted. That's crystal clear in your brain.
No, this happens to me all the time. Yeah.
And that's what happens with me, is that and then you go, okay, maybe, do they have a point? Yes, they have a point. You have a point.
You guys want some validation? So when I post my cartoons onto my personal blog, Rall.com, there's a section for the transcript. And I used to never do it because I was too lazy, because I'm a wordy cartoonist, to write the transcript to my cartoons. But now with AI, I can just upload the cartoon and it'll generate the transcript automatically. Oh, wow. And when it does, it gives you an explanation of what the cartoon is about and the political point it's trying to make. So now I'm like, well, AI knows what I'm trying to say. So, it's them, it's not me.
So, but what happens is when that happens, I eventually get over myself and come back with a cartoon idea that's, I'd say 98% of the time, it's better than the one I try to foist on the editors and vis-a-vis the readers. So
yeah, that's what happened this morning. I literally was walking out the door to go to work, and you said that, and I was like, and then you send me another text saying, this is on deadline. I said, I'm working on it. And within 10 minutes, I gave you 4 ideas, and one of them was really quite good. So it worked out great. Yeah. Sometimes you just don't get married to it, and you just, punt it away and just start over. And that's what I did this morning. So it was fun. But like I said, I enjoy that. I don't know why. I don't enjoy being told that I don't get it. But then again, I married somebody who literally looks at most of my cartoons and says, no, it's not funny. It's like, oh, come on. I was a janitor when she met me, so she had different expectations. She just hoped I'd clean the house.
No, is that actually true?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. First job out of college, high school janitor.
Oh, wow.
I was drawing on the walls and cleaning it off because I could. So
you'd still be doing that if you were in the New York City public schools, because those people make like $300,000 a year.
Oh, I know. Yeah, no, trust me. And it wasn't. Wow. I have to admit, it wasn't the hardest job in the world. It was kind of disgusting sometimes, but it was the best job in the world because about 6 months into it, my attitude finally got better. I was like a fart in the elevator, man. Nobody could get away from me. They didn't want to be around me. And I just totally said, okay, no, I'm burying my talent here. I need to get to work. And I met one of the other janitors whose husband was an Eastern airline pilot and had just lost his job because the airline tanked because of the strike and because of all the crap going on. Well, anyway, with Frank Lorenzo. Anyway, she just said to me one day, hey, my daughter just broke up with her boyfriend. How would you like to go out with my daughter? And I said, your standards for your daughter are remarkably low. It's not like I'm going to be a doctor here. And she introduced me to her, and we've been married for 33 years. So.
Oh, it's amazing.
Wow.
Yeah, pretty cool. Yeah, and also met another teacher who said, hey, I've got a friend who works at the local newspaper, and I got a job as an advertising artist, and that's how I got my career started too.
It's amazing.
There's something about going into that newsroom, isn't it?
Oh yeah, no, smelling the ink and the cigarette smoke and the alcohol, it was really amazing.
In the despair, yeah,
despair. Yeah,
that's what I always wanted. I mean, in all seriousness, it's my big regret in life is I never got to work in a newsroom.
Oh, yeah, it was a fantastic experience. I grew up in a newsroom, as I've mentioned before. My father was general manager of TV stations, so local stations always had the newsroom. He'd park me in the back of them with a stack of paper and some pencils and say, shut up, don't talk to anybody. And which is exactly pretty much the job description for editorial cartoonist. Stay in the back of the room, shut up, don't say anything, draw funny pictures. Yeah, but that's where Marshall and I were like very similar in that. Now, you were not a cartoonist per se when you got engaged and married, right?
No, I started out like in the advertising world, but I got literally 2 weeks before my wedding, a headhunter got in touch with me, and I got a job at the Conroe Courier in Texas, and I was their creative director, which meant I did everything. I'd redesign the newspaper, I did editorial graphics, I would design ads, and I started doing cartoons for them. And Ramirez won the Pulitzer at Copley, so they pulled him out of the package. and I just had happened to send in my work that week. And because RAM, SEY, and Ramirez kind of start with the same first three letters, I think, because that was the only thing I could figure what happened. But they like my work, and they like how I sold myself to them. And eventually they hired me to come work for them. And so I worked out at Copley for a couple of years out in San Diego. And my former editor in Texas called me up and said, dude, the cartooning job's open in Mississippi. And I said, the number you have reached has been disconnected, because I lived in San Diego, damn it. It was great. But he kept after me, and I'm glad he did, because I thought I'd be here 2 years, and I'm on my 30th now. So it's been
both
a good
of you
run
guys are originally from San Diego area, right? And then ended up in the deep South. I mean,
yeah. Well, I'm from Atlanta originally, so that's where
okay.
I grew up. But yeah, so I was kind of to me, San Diego was like, I remember driving down the interstate, seeing the sign to LA, and the California Highway Patrol went by on motorcycles. And I'm like, hey, there's Ponch and John. Like,
totally.
So it was like being surreal, seeing, boat parades on Christmas, it was really, but we loved it. It was a good time.
Are you sorry you left? Because let me tell you, because like I said, I'm retiring from a lot of the work I'm doing, and a lot of the things I've been doing. And so a lot of things are going through my brain, a lot of flashbacks, which I'm assuming is the brain cell's about to die in just one last.
It is.
Thanks, Ted.
You're welcome.
Jerk.
Yeah.
Anyways, so I did wonder if, I was living in Los Angeles with Janine, my wife of 40, coming up on 45 years, and wondering what would have happened if I had not taken my first job out of state, which was at the Memphis Commercial Appeal. Which turned out great, had a great editor, had a great time. The city, even then.
It's really sad now to see what's happened, because the building's empty and, so forth on the Commercial Appeal. I'm an hour away from Memphis now. So
the tallest building downtown, if any of you have seen this, they have a video. There's Clovis. Hey, Clovis, say hi to Marshall.
Hello.
I say hello to no one.
He's like, is it food? Can I get it? Can I eat it?
Oh, to cats, we're all food. Anyway, so I do you ever regret leaving San Diego? And wonder what would have, because Copley News Service no longer around.
Yeah, I definitely would. I don't know what I would be doing now if I were there. I'd be doing something, obviously. But I think about how my boys would be different. They probably would be surfers.
Dude. Yeah, mine would definitely.
Yeah,
I love surfing.
It's like, I turned down the job in Oklahoma too, and I always thought about, they would have graduated from the University of Oklahoma probably, and it's just kind of interesting to think, because I think it probably had more effect on them than it would have on me. But no, I would have figured something out there, but. Now, I really, this turned out to be a pretty good move. It didn't, at the time, it was a leap of faith, but yeah, because like the reason why I didn't go to Oklahoma, which was as good a job as any, because that was after Marlette passed away, and that job was open
at the Tulsa World.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it was like more money and less work. I mean, it was great, but I also understood that the newspaper business was starting to crumble. And I had more of a brand here, and I'd be able to survive here. And that's exactly what happened. Because like within 2 years, I was part-time, and I had a radio show and had to create a publishing company and everything else to survive. And I'd have had a harder time doing that in Oklahoma than I would have here. So I used to be a Presbyterian, and I always think about predestiny sometimes, and I don't believe it. But, if you look backwards, it all worked out the way it was supposed to work out.
Yeah, well, that's the only thing you can. Yeah, because the reason I bring all of this up is I'm just one of the things I think back. As I said, my mother-in-law passed away recently, and I asked her, and she would never answer. But I cannot think for a moment what she and my father-in-law thought when Janine and I came prancing in. I'm 21, Janine's 22, and with a ring on her finger, and say, I'm engaged to an unemployed cartoonist.
Yay!
Every parent's dream.
Yeah,
indeed.
I mean, obviously it worked out, and to a point. But I just wondering what your wife Amy's parents thought when you told them. Was your
well,
mom,
I think they were
her
just
mom
glad.
and
Yeah, I was getting her out of the house, so that was good. But she was still in college when I met her, and we were going to get married, and I was making $7.50 an hour, and she didn't even have a teaching job. She was substitute teaching, And we got an apartment that was going to take about 75% of our income, on that. And literally this headhunter called 2 weeks before our wedding, and they paid me, it was like 25 grand, right? Which back in, like, to quote my children, back then that would have bought a house, because my children like to remind me that I'm very old. And I mean, it was just amazing. And she got a teaching job where she actually made more than I did, so it was like suddenly we did fine, and then we had a flood and we barely got out of that, but we got out of that. But like I said, we were very fortunate on how everything worked out. And the cartooning job here, like I said, when that opened up, it was just like, oh, wow, a full-time staff job. And I thought, well, I'll be here 2 years, like I mentioned before. But, like I said, it turned out for weirdly enough, the Clarion Ledger at that time really punched above its weight. We had another guy that was a Pulitzer finalist. They had won a Pulitzer. The editorial department that I worked in were great. We had conservatives and we had liberals, and we all would argue just every morning on the meeting, but we all loved each other, for the most part, and we still do. I don't miss the paper per se, but I miss the people that I worked with. And that was something that was amazing about it. And hell, I got to draw 7 cartoons a week, and a lot of them local that kind of made a difference. I had Katrina that literally was a big part of what, that was one of the Pulitzer packages. And I think one of the judges said if I lived where the hurricane hit, I would have won. So
what? Wait, what?
Yeah.
You did?
I did. That's what I heard. I don't know if that was true or not, but yeah, no, we had 12 hours of 75 to 80 mile an hour winds, even in Jackson. So, but the coast, and I worked down on the coast quite a bit, was obliterated.
So the judge literally said that.
Well, somebody told me the judge said that, so I'm not going to say that officially, but that always has bothered me a little bit. So that said,
I'm looking at Ted's face.
Well, I mean, look, here's the thing. I've heard some really dumb reasons why people have won or lost prizes, including ones that I've won for dumb reasons, right? And that's really that one's way up there. That's a really dumb reason.
Yeah, I'd like to believe that's not true, but I have to admit, in my book of grudges, which I keep, and because that's what we do as cartoonists, is we're generally on that. That said, one of my friends who did win a Pulitzer for their coverage of and lived in Gulfport, where they had 30 feet of water. I'm really glad I was in Jackson, where it was only 70 to 80 mile an hour winds. The trees. It took me 2.5 hours to get back from the house from the office to my house. I had 4 trees fall in front of me, and an interstate sign nearly hit my car. It was really white knuckle, on that. But the worst part was obviously we didn't have gasoline for a couple of weeks and so forth. So things started shutting down real quick.
So I have to jump in real quick.
Well, what part of experience that this summer?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No kidding. I got to tell you, it sucks. So just to kind of give you a little bit of a preview.
What part of find shelter didn't you understand? Don't go out in the wind. Just curious.
Yeah, I got, Amy was scared and, wanted me to go, but I didn't, honestly, I'd never experienced anything like that. So I didn't know any better. So, I was an idiot. Nobody ever said I was smart, Scott. You know that. So.
That's not true. In our press release for the handoff, it's going to say you're smart.
Okay. Well, thank you. I appreciate
AI will fact check that, but
yeah. How many Teaser and Scott? I'm writing you a check.
3.
Okay.
So editorial cartooning. Now you and every other cartoonist has really gotten, what's the word I'm looking for? Fucked by the newspaper industry in one way or another by what's happening. And Ted and I have gone over this subject many times. I still haven't found, Ted, I gotta be honest, I haven't found an explanation that makes a hell of a lot of sense yet. Why did editors work so hard to get rid of us? Quick example, Mike Thompson, editorial cartoonist, previously at USA Today. Lovely guy, great guy. But besides that, also a great cartoonist. And he did something, he put together, I forget how many times a week he put together the Cartoon Gallery, which was by far and away the most viewed thing on USA Today's site literally by hundreds of thousands of views. He literally paid for himself. They bring in a cost-cutting person whose job was to cut costs, hence the title. And
cost-cutting person. Yes.
Cost-cutting. And one of the first things they cut, you know where this is going, kids, was Mike Thompson.
Of course.
Right.
Why? And they got rid of the gallery. And shortly thereafter even said, we're not running editorial cartoons of any kind, period.
Yeah.
Why did editors, and I'm going to guess they still do because they're still around, why did they hate us? Why did they work so hard to destroy this profession?
You know, like I said, I'm afraid if I start telling you too deep, I'd tell you what I've been telling my therapist for the last, 16 years.
That's why we're here.
They had laid off a columnist, and they caught a lot of blowback on that. And I think they originally wanted to lay me off totally. But I think the editor kind of stepped in and said, hey, do you want to really burn this place down? Because people would be really upset if we got rid of them totally. So their solution was making me part-time, and so that was my deal, which, suddenly when you lose your benefits and half your pay and you're still doing about the same amount of work. But for me, and the way I handled it was, and I didn't handle it well initially, but I started thinking, I've got half the day and I can do other things. And I started figuring out new ways of making money and ways to kind of bulletproof my brand a little bit. Being my brand, meaning my children can eat, and so I think that probably served me about as well as anything. But hell, editorial cartoons, like you said, I mean, I look at something and I know that generally obituary cartoons are kind of shunned and so forth, but I had one that like went beyond viral to the point where they were showing it like during the funeral of the person I drew. But the fact was the cartoon and the topic of it was one that really resonated with people who'd lost children. And that happened, 8 years ago? And I still have people that call me up every day saying, I have that on my bulletin board. I lost my child. Now let me tell you about my child. Editorial cartoons matter. And they're visual. We are a visual media, That's how we like our storytelling. It fits perfectly on phones. So I don't understand why that there wasn't some thought that we could, pivot and grow and change and figure out a way to still be a marquee for a paper. But no, you're right. And I think what happened was they said, well, we got to cut this much of the budget. We can't do age. We got to be careful about cutting older people because we don't want to get age lawsuits and everything. We'll just cut by position. So they cut the sports columnist, they cut the columnist, they cut the movie reviewer, they cut the religion editor. So they just were looking for boxes to check. And our salaries, I don't think any of the three of us are sitting in the middle of a mansion right now.
Nope.
But, we made probably more than your average reporter. And so some bean counter saw that number. And like I had just gotten a raise because I had turned down the Tulsa job. So that put a target on my back. And so, yeah, I mean, it was a confluence of a whirlwind of stupidity and panic. I mean, literally, I think it got to the point where the business was like that scene in Titanic where the officer's shooting the passengers. There was just panic at that point, and you think about that time. I miss the daily newsroom, and I know, sorry, Ted, I know you do, Scott, but like I said, we're all still doing what we do and we still love what we do. And I think that says a lot, either that we're crazy or persistent. I'm not quite sure.
Well, okay, I think but I also would be curious what both of you guys have to say about, like, my question is not about like what went wrong, because I think we know what, I agree with Marshall, every word you said. I'm sure that's what happened.
Yeah.
But my question is more puzzling, has been like, why haven't news, like local TV station websites, why haven't CNN.com, why hasn't Axios hired motherjones.com? Why are they not hiring cartoonists? They do well online, right? They do when they're given a chance. I've edited quite a few cartoon roundups. I was the editor at Forbes. I was the editor of Daily Beast Roundup, and those things always did great, which always mystified me why they fired me and got rid of the roundups, but they always did. And I think we have a different set of problems with the websites, with the digital world, which is that those people, like with print editors, they were journalists who often had to be educated about what graphics, the power of graphics and editorial cartooning. But these people are not educatable because a lot of them aren't even journalists. They're tech people. They're not even really word people, right? We're worse off. So we're not able to make the transition. And the other part I wanted to ask you guys about is stuff that moves. So really only Mark Fiore has ever been able to make a living from animated editorial cartoons. And I'm not sure how that's going now even, but like, I have my producer for this podcast, Robbie, he uses AI to make my static 2D editorial cartoons move. And the same cartoon that will get 7 retweets will get 7,000 retweets if it moves. People, it's the same content. The lips move a little bit. That's it. I mean, I don't know. It's just like what's going on?
Is it the algorithm is kind of weighted toward reels and toward, I think that may be part of it. Because I can walk through the grove, like after the ice storm, I walk through the grove with me, the least telegenic person in the world, talking about the damage in the grove. Now, obviously, people were interested in that. We had a really bad ice storm this year that we were closed for two weeks. That's how bad it was, and that never happens. And that sucker, I mean, it took off. It had like 5,000 likes just like that, and I mean, like, my Instagram doesn't normally do that well,
Probably because it was weather. The algos hate political content. They push anything political down.
Yeah.
On X, less so, but still.
Yeah. Well, but I'm still going to hold your feet to the fire. And Ted, you've been an editor. You were an editor at United Media. Why the disdain? Why the loathing? How many times, Marshall, were your cartoons, your little cartoons, because I got that my entire career. Why this scorn from higher ups, people who could make these decisions? I never understood it. And I don't to this day. Can you explain it? You're a professor now. Tell me, damn it.
Yeah, hang on. Let me put my little book of grievances here. Now, it's really weird because, like I said, sometimes within the building and outside the building, there would be a difference of you go outside the building, it's like, oh man, I love that cartoon, or I love this cartoon. And inside the building, you just hear crickets, right? And you're like, okay, but I think I'm doing a good job here, and so forth. So there was always that weird, and I don't know if they just didn't want to give you a big head or what the deal was on that. I don't know. And I mean, I understand, like, for instance, and I don't want to trash on Mark. Mark's no longer with us and so forth. I think Mark, because he and my boss did not get along, I kind of understood that one a little bit. And, and I was pretty lucky because they gave me raises at the Clarion Ledger and so forth. And they pretty much valued me until they didn't, until obviously the officers started shooting the passengers. But I don't know, I hear from, I used to hear from artists, well, you're not an artist. And I would hear from people on the radio, you're not a radio person. And people on TV, you're not a TV person. And I hear from writers, you're not a writer. And I was like, no, but I do all those things pretty well. So, I mean, so it was like, I mean, I would just kind of walk around just kind of like going, I don't get it. I don't understand why I can't seem to fit into a group here. But then I stopped really worrying about it and just said, shit, I'm going to try to do a good job, and just kind of went from there. Well,
here, I'm going to lavish praise on my co-host here, but Ted has had a career where he's been right. He's way ahead of the curve. He is up. He's like, they once described Da Vinci, although he's not quite that caliber. Although I ask him, he may think he is. Huh. But, they described Da Vinci as a child awake in the house before the adults are up. Yeah. And that's Ted. No, Ted, you have called so many major events, so many major stories, and said, this means that. Clearly, you have a track record of in years before it became evident that you were right.
Thank you, Scott. Well, I'm not Da Vinci, even in my own mind.
Well,
not even. No,
you like drawing naked.
But I do have good pattern recognition for some reason. It's part of my personality.
You do, and you take it. But even with that track record, which goes back to the 90s, you're still viewed as a cartoonist. Mm-hmm. You get a little love here and there, but for the most part, none of us are ever brought in No cartoonist was ever brought in and say, okay, for a more serious look at this issue, here's so-and-so.
Right.
It's always been.
It's always diminutive. It's always that people like, oh, and he's just a cartoonist, or why should anyone care what a cartoonist thinks?
Yeah. They would rather have.
I'm a syndicated columnist, and let me tell you, cartooning's harder, for sure. And I'm pretty good as a columnist, but cartooning is much harder. I think it's, to answer your question, Scott, I mean, I've never heard any editor outright say this, but I'm 99% convinced that the answer to your question is that our work is deceptively simple. It looks like, I remember James Thurber received a letter. I read somewhere that he had received a letter from someone who said, "Oh, my 8-year-old daughter could draw as well as you," and he's like, "Good for her, let her." And the point is that, like, it's true that the art is deceptively simple. It's not complicated. And you and I'm not going to mention names here, but there are some of our peers who draw in a very fussy, like draftsman-like style. That and they tend to be taken maybe a little more seriously because they draw that way.
I'm thinking, like
I'm
someone whose name rhymes with Ramirez.
Exactly, and is very close to Ramirez. Yes, and I mean, and so the thing is, he gets. I mean, seriously, if you draw like that, you get. But I like, the way we all draw. I mean, I like. We all have obviously distinct styles, but we don't draw like that. And I think that because it looks like something like, oh, I could do that. It's like punk rock. People are like, oh, I could play like that. Yeah, but then you're not. And you're probably wrong. It's Charles Schultz had a deceptively simple line. I mean, it's Gary Larson wasn't a great draftsman. That doesn't matter. I mean, great draftsmen are a dime a dozen. As I learned as an editor at United Media, a lot of people draw well. I mean, good writing and ideas, those are hard to come by.
That's right. And to do it regularly, I mean, because it's, and that was the thing, just even in going to Prickly City for a second, when Scott mentioned it to me, I'm like, well, yeah, I can probably do one or two. I just wanted to see if I could do it with some regularity. And I think after we got through the third week, I realized, okay, yeah, no, this is fine. I can do that. But you're right, Ted. I think honestly, it's more about the idea. Somebody once told me it was like 80% idea, 20% art. And, and obviously we've got, and I think the attention span's gotten shorter in our career's lifespan, right? But we only have 10, 15, 20 seconds to catch somebody's attention, Ted, you put a lot into yours and everything else, but it's good. And it makes you want to stay in it to a compliment to you. But yeah, no, I mean, it's like literally, but that's why we're so damn good at what we do. And, because we can make a point, sometimes even without words, that, probably blows away something next to us that's got 600 to 800 words next to us. No, it's something that, I mean,
if we drew like Daumier, though, I bet if we all drew like Daumier, I bet we wouldn't have this problem with the editors.
You don't think so?
No, I think they'd be like, look, it's fancy. Look how pretty it is. It's like, I can't draw like that. That's what it is.
Well, right? I'm not sure if I've ever told Marshall this story. I know I've told our listeners once or twice, but I actually had an assistant features editor say how easy my job was.
Oh, yeah.
I said, well,
that's always a pleasure to hear.
Oh, well, and I also challenged him to say, do me a favor, come up with an idea a day. I can't draw. I go, art doesn't matter. Just come up with the idea. That's all. Mm-hmm. After the end of the second day, he said, I can't do this. I said, no, you cannot. This is a skill set.
It's humbling. I mean, I remember, I was tried out for, this is a funny story in my past, but I was desperate to get a job, and I was interviewed and sort of talked to by Priscilla Buckley of the National Review, and I was willing to try doing Republican cartoons. Scott, you know the story, and I just couldn't do it.
Smiley.
I literally could not, and this is, my first takeaway was like, humor is inherently liberal. But then I'm like, nah, that's not true. It's like, because there are people, I mean, PJ O'Rourke proves that's not true. And like, so the point is something that looks like you might be able to do it. And you're like, not necessarily. When I tried out for radio, the three of us have all done radio.
Yeah.
I walked in, they kind of like sprung it on me and said, "Oh, you're going to be on the air in an hour." "Oh, we lied. You're on the air now. Go." And that was the test. Right. And
that's amazing. That's amazing.
I asked the producer, "Well, what happens to most people who do this?" And she said, "They just freeze." I go, "What do you mean they just freeze?" She's like, "They don't say anything. They just look, they just stare at the big fat microphone."
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, because we all talk. Everybody can talk, right?
God, the first time on my radio, because I landed into like a 5-day a week, 3-hour show. So
Jeez.
I mean that literally is like getting to run a marathon every day.
Yeah, that's what mine was. 3 hours. Also.
The first segment, and I'd been a guest on the radio for years, so I mean I'm comfortable, and I wasn't nervous or anything. I got on there. The first segment was 23 minutes long.
You're dying.
And I made it to 15, and I ran out of just gas. I had nothing left. And you're
looking at the second hand like,
oh my God, the dead air. There's nothing more terrifying than that sound of nothing. And my editor, my producer, I could see her starting to smile. And she knew what was going on. And she let me sit there and squirm for about 40 minutes. It seemed like. Awesome. It was like 40 seconds. And then she jumped in and we continued a conversation until the very end. And that's when I learned I better damn well have lots of content when I come on here.
Yes.
Well, the first time I did a show, I came in with a whole list, like a legal pad full of issues and quippy comments. And it was going to be fantastic. And like you, Marshall, literally 8.5 minutes in, I've gotten to the bottom of the page.
Yeah.
I went, oh, shit. Which you can't say on the air, of course. But
right.
So, I turned to my producer. "So, Wendy, how you doing?"
Yeah. And I was like, "Hey, let me tell you a story about how my dog," you're just like, oh, God. And I mean, it was, like I said, I got better. I mean, I did that show for 2 years and
wow.
And they let me go, and it really worked out well because I had really good ratings, but they'd gotten a sports show they wanted to put on, and I'd come out with a book. And so I went straight from the radio show to the book, which had actually made more money than the radio show. And it worked out, but it was like, that was one of the most, I always joked that they wanted Dave Ramsey, not Marshall Ramsey, and they got me instead, so it was, but like, then I picked up a 1 hour a week show where I just interviewed people, which I think turned out to be one of the best jobs I've ever had, because I got to meet 52 new people every year, for 13 years. And so I think that helped me get known around the state as much as anything.
Are you still doing the radio show?
No, I quit when I came up here. I'm thinking about doing a podcast because, like, my dog has a podcast right now. So I figured, I might as well jump in there.
That's got a goddamn podcast.
Yeah. Well, it probably is pretty good. I have not listened to it yet. So
we should probably look at some of Marshall's cartoons. We don't have time for ours, Scott, but that's
okay. Shit. Hurry up, man. We've got a few minutes.
Here we go. Right.
I'm going to hit you with some local ones here.
All right, here we go.
Okay, I'll set this up for you. The state of Mississippi controls the distribution of alcohol. So basically, it's their way. That's how they tax for alcohol. So they'll bring it in, then they turn around and give it to liquor stores. The problem is, it's like most things government, not very efficient. And this year, literally, there are liquor stores and bars and actually a couple of distilleries that are about to go out of business because they can't figure out how to get it out.
Ridiculous.
Yes. Very inefficient.
A billboard for the people who listen to the podcast. Delivering alcohol is as easy as A, B, and it's like Z, cross out D, cross out F, cross out U, cross out G, crossed out. And the guy in the truck saying, this is so hard.
All right, here we go. Here's another one.
So we had a horrific ice storm up in North Mississippi, up to 1.5 to 2 inches of ice. Took down trees, power lines. It was, the only thing ice is good for is drinks. And so the legislature put forward a bill so that you could get low interest loans. The governor vetoed it, saying that the interest rate was too low on the loans. Basically, the governor doesn't much care for much some of this area. So basically, I had him throwing out the roll of paper towels like Trump did in Puerto Rico with a veto on it. So it was a major FU to the people up here. A lot of the people who were big supporters of his and voted for him. So he doesn't like me very much.
What's the animosity? Why did he do this?
He doesn't like the mayor of Oxford. So they kind of went at it during COVID, and so I think that's what drove a lot of it. But he does like data centers. So, and he doesn't, so trying to figure out how to get his support. They could just turn the school into call it a data center, and they could get some money.
Gotcha. All right. Let's see.
Thank God for billboards. Yeah, this was kind of, I ended up actually doing a lot of stuff and put on my social media during the storm because I really didn't have much else to do. We were lucky. We only lost power for 2 days where we lived. And so my nephew came to stay with us with their 7-month-old, and they had lost power for over a week. And some places it was 2 weeks. It was awful. And so, but it was literally the 5 stages of grief. And one of the things I did, and I know this sounds terribly corny, but I had the power guy stringing back up the lines, and it had a little word hope written in the line on that. It was just a simple image with the destruction everywhere. And it really meant a lot to the people here. Sometimes you feel like you're doing ideas that maybe aren't biting or cutting or anything else, but there's other times when you realize that, this is where you live. And if you can do something to help everybody out a little bit, and that's kind of what that turned out to be. Our speaker decided he wanted to take all the funding from public schools and be able to give it to private schools.
All the money?
Not all of it, but quite a bit of the funding. And but for school choice, where they could take and leave it. And that's really weird when you have the Mississippi Delta and when you have some other areas where it's very hard for not only for a student to leave a public school and go to a private school that may be 40 miles away, but also the fact they may not get admitted too. And so there's a lot of issues that went on with that, but it just seemed to be it was a nationally driven initiative, I think, and it really turned out to be a tone deaf one. Yes, can schools be better? Oh yeah, but honestly, that's not a way. We had Lane Kiffin here, was the coach, obviously, and we had a coach at Ole Miss that was named. Well, he's a Florida resident that I think's running for Alabama governor now.
I've heard of him.
Yeah, I thought you might know him a little bit. And so, but he said that he would never leave the school here, his job, unless he was carried off in a pine box. And then think about 35 seconds after he said it, he went to Auburn. So, so I had Lane Kiffin, on his knees, basically touching base with his spirit animal, trying to figure out.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Well, Marshall, that's it for the show. We're out of the hour, but thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me on, Scott. Thank you for the gift of the strip, and I'll try to, take care of your creation as best I can, because I'm really excited about it.
I know you will, but here's the one thing I need you to do. I'm going to start this. We usually have a song we sing as we exit, and Marshall, I'm going to start it off, and you're going to finish it. Okay?
Yeah,
you know the words to this.
Here we go.
You know the words to this. You ready?
Okay.
All right. 3, 2, 1.
And see. that's your cue, Marshall.
It was a joyful noise. You missed it.
Are you not? You're from. Oh my God.
What?
Bye.